Story 1. A lawyer's pro-revenge on a landlord. Landlords are assholes, generally speaking. Everyone knows that. But if you think residential landlords are bad, they're nothing compared to commercial landlords. Landlords of commercial buildings are some of the cruelest, nastiest people I've ever come across. This revenge tale is about a commercial landlord and how I dealt with him. Back in the 90s, sometimes I'd go for lunch at this restaurant in the basement of our building. The place was called The Vault because it had a massive bank vault that had always been there, dating back to the days before the place was turned into a restaurant. The vault was so huge that they could seat a couple of tables in there, and you could eat dinner surrounded by rows of old, gleaming safe deposit boxes. One day I was there for lunch, and the owner took me aside. "The landlord's driving me nuts," he said. "The landlord drives everyone nuts." I was a subtenant in the same building, sharing space with an older lawyer, Aaron, and the landlord was always causing us trouble. I'd already had a few run-ins with him, and we hated each other on sight. In most jurisdictions, commercial landlords don't need court orders to get you out. Instead, they just change the locks and you find out about it when you show up and your key doesn't work. Every time our landlord had a dispute with anyone, which was often, he'd always threaten to change the locks. He keeps demanding all this stuff for extra rent, and it's really weird because a lot of it's really old. The restaurant owner showed me a letter the landlord had served on him earlier that day. I looked over the demand and read a list of expenses for snow removal and parking lot repair and common area flooring and all kinds of crap going back years. I read it all the way to the end, and there it was, the usual clause saying he was going to change the locks if the tenant didn't pay this and do that. From the wording of the demand, it looks like you've been fighting a while. Why did you wait before consulting a lawyer? I asked one of the lawyers I know, and he said it's hopeless. He told me the lawyer's name. It was a guy I knew with a shitty real estate practice, who'd resorted to taking little legal aid cases to keep the lights on when the market tanked in '89. "You do something to make the landlord hate you?" I asked, because this is a bit over the top, even for our asshole landlord. "He knows I'm moving the restaurant. I think he's trying to grab as much money as possible before I go. Plus, he's giving me grief over the vault. He won't let you take it with you? Are you kidding? It weighs almost 100 tons, and I don't need it. But the lease says I have to remove it, and that I also have to restore the building to what it was before there was a vault. That would cost a fortune. The asshole landlord says if I leave the vault behind when I move, he'll sue. Send your lease up to my office, and let me look it over," I said. I finished my lunch, and when I got back to my office, the lease was waiting for me. It was just as bad as the restaurant owner said. The lease was a renewal of an assignment of a renewal, the original documents dating back to the shortly after W.W.2 when a bank first leased the place and the vault was installed. Somehow the landlord had suckered the restaurant into taking over a lease that left him liable to remove a bank vault at the end of term. No big deal, I thought. The restaurant can default, and all the landlord can do is sue a shell company. But when I got to the last page of the lease, there was a guarantee clause. The restaurant owner had personally guaranteed the lease, and he was on the hook for removing a vault weighing 100 tons, and then fixing the place up. It would cost a fortune. The case was hopeless, of course. That was obvious right away. But then I thought about the asshole landlord with his demands and his threats and his rent hikes, and I asked my brain to do me a solid, which it promptly did. I picked up the phone and called the restaurant owner. "I'm fucked, right? You're calling me to say there's no way out." That's what my commercial lawyer already said. But I just thought I'd ask. "I can save you, but it's gonna cost." "How much?" "5,000 in legals, and another G-note for the agent." "Agent? What kind of agent?" "Real estate. Send up a check, certified, and leave the rest to me." The check hit my desk in less than an hour. I went to Aaron's office. "I need a real estate agent," I said. "You buying a house?" "Nope." "Selling a house?" "Nope." By this point, I'd been sharing space with Aaron for almost 5 years, and he knew me pretty well. "You pulling one of your stunts again?" he asked. "Yup, but nothing that will get you into trouble." "I know a guy." Aaron knew all kinds of guys, and that's one of the reasons he eventually got disbarred. But he knew a guy and he gave me the agent's name and number, and the next day, I paid the agent a visit. I told him what I needed and we agreed to terms. I gave him some papers and the cash for his fee. A few days later I was again at the vault for lunch. The owner saw me walk in and greeted me himself. "The landlord's here," he said. "Why?" "For lunch and to be an asshole. Let's sit in the vault room so I don't have to look at his face." He took me to the vault room, and with the door almost completely closed, we had a consultation while we ate pasta and drank red wine. "We're making demand on the landlord," I said, munching on spaghetti carbonara. "Demand? What are we demanding?" I pulled a document out of my briefcase and passed it to him while I sipped my wine. "We're demanding that the asshole landlord release all the restaurant equipment, all the fixtures. The ovens, the freezers, the ventilation. Everything you need to run a restaurant. The lease exempts all that stuff. He can't stop me taking what I want. The only thing that matters is the vault, and of course I don't want that." I shook my head. "You need the vault," I said, "and we're demanding that he release the bank vault as well. We're insisting that he let you take it out within 7 business days. You think you can beat the landlord with reverse psychology? You think if you treat him like a 2-year-old, you can manipulate him into doing what you want? We'll find out soon enough." He's had the demand for a couple of days now. The restaurant owner dropped his wine glass and it shattered on the marble floor. "You already gave it to him?" the restaurant owner said. He got up, swung open the vault door and called for the waiter to clean up the mess. "Let's see what the landlord has to say," I told him, and we walked over to the landlord's table. The landlord was a big, beefy man with a big appetite. He sat alone, eating wolfishly and with his hands. "My client needs an answer today," I said. The landlord looked up at me as he chewed noisily. "I'm the vault's lawyer," I said. "I gave you a demand the other day. My client needs an answer right now. He needs the vault for a new place, and he's got to make arrangements. Your client can forget about the bank vault," he said, wiping his massive greasy hands on an already soiled napkin. "But you can't do that," I said. My shock was feigned, but the restaurant owner's jaw dropped for real. The landlord laughed at us. "I'm the landlord. I can do what I want. I'm gonna need that in writing, because my client might sue," I said. "Sue all you like," the landlord told me. "Sue, till you're blue in the face." He told me that I'd have a formal response by day's end, and then he told me to go away and let him finish his lunch. When the letter arrived from the landlord, claiming ownership over the bank vault, I brought it downstairs and showed it to my client. "How the hell did you do that?" "Trade secret," I said. The following month the restaurant moved out and the place was empty, and that was too bad, because I had always liked eating at the vault. Now the restaurant was in a new location 20 minutes away. They called the new place the Vault, and they'd preserved the vibe of the old place. It was very similar, except they didn't have the bank vault. The bank vault, all 100 tons of it, was where it had always been, in the basement of the building where I rented space. I showed up for work a little after that, and Aaron collared me. "The landlord's looking for you," he said. "Oh yeah? What about?" "He's really angry, Aaron. He said his deal fell through." "Deal?" "He was supposed to rent the place downstairs to a new tenant, a bank or a credit union or something like that. They were supposed to come in to sign a lease, but they didn't show up." "And what's that got to do with me?" I said to Aaron, and I said the same thing again to the landlord when he managed to track me down a couple of days later. "I know you were behind this," he said, his jowls quivering. "I know it was you. That offer from the agent, it was all bullshit. Just a trick to make me keep the vault so that your client could sneak out of the place and leave that fucking bank vault behind. I'm gonna sue. If you're looking for counsel, I think I'm going to have to declare a conflict. I'm gonna sue the restaurant and that agent, and I'm gonna sue you." He stormed off. But the landlord didn't sue. Of course he didn't. He didn't have a contract to sue on, only a vague letter of intent that I drafted. Enough to hook a greedy landlord who was used to having his way. The offer he'd received was non-binding, incapable of acceptance without the signing of a formal lease, which of course never got signed. When I left Aaron's place a year later, the downstairs was still unoccupied, with a sad for rent sign sitting in the window, starting to look faded. Story 2. You took apart my fish tank? We both sink to the bottom. So to keep it simple, yesterday, I got a Siamese fighting fish, or known as a betta fish, named Eclipse. Due to obvious reasons, I unfortunately didn't have a proper aquarium for it. So I made one out of a large storage container from Home Depot, plastic, a coffee mug, sponge filter plus air pump, and a little bit of sand. Wasn't perfect, but it would do until then. So my aunt complains earlier this morning that, why you got this big-ass container for this small-ass fish? And it don't need all that shit. For those who don't know, betta fish need at least a 5-gallon tank. So I tried explaining to her that this isn't one of those carnival goldfish and needs certain criteria to thrive. And that didn't work. Anyway, I leave off of school. I get a call from my girlfriend, God I fucking love her, that I can have her old 30-gallon aquarium plus filter and heater. I leave 2 hours early from school to put Eclipse in his new home, only to find that she took upon herself to dismantle my makeshift fish tank piece by piece, leaving Eclipse dead in a Tupperware bowl filled with freezing cold water in the middle of my bedroom floor. When I confronted her, she said, I told you her don't need all that shit. And that's what fish do. They swim and die. Bet. So once she left to run errands, I went into the living room and grabbed her picture of her deceased grandfather. The only thing she has left related to him, and I dismantled the frame bit by bit. And when she comes back home, where she's gonna find the picture? At the bottom of the bowl, torn in shreds in freezing cold water, in the middle of her bedroom floor. Sure, it might be a fish, but it was my fish. My money. My joy. Literally murdered in cold blood. Welp, tonight she's gonna learn just how little things can make a big difference. Swim in peace, Eclipse, who lasted as long as her namesake. Update. Now, what you've all been waiting for. The update. So, about 2 hours after posting the OG, she got home and saw the carnage of my actions. And I never heard such a shrill scream in my life. And what's make it worse is that I couldn't help but smile. You see, this isn't the first time she's disregarded something of mine. This will be the last, though. What makes this different is that it's a living animal involved. She ridiculed my girlfriend in public. She's took $100 my cousin got for me for my birthday and held on to it. That was a year and a half ago. She's misplaced a scrapbook full of letters from my mother during her stay at the nursing home. She passed away in 2019, and none of those incidents got responses from me. At the time, I thought everything was happening for a reason. But this was the last time I was gonna sit there and do shit about it. You see, I've something about people. The only language that everyone truly knows and understands is violence. Anyway, she started crying. Cried so much, she could fill her own damn aquarium. Once she got done bawling her eyes out, she stormed into my room and questioned me about it. I simply told her, doesn't feel good, does it? To have your shit disregarded. I bet it doesn't. Besides, didn't your grandpa hate you because you refused to look after his grandson? He never wanted to see you again. That includes beyond the grave. She then proceeded to threaten to have me arrested for destruction for property. I argued that I could do the same for animal cruelty/abuse. After an hour or so of this, she finally said that one day you're gonna learn to stop touching people's shit, and proceeded to leave the room. I responded, and you learned that lesson today. Was that disrespectful? Oh, for sure. You can call me a monster, an asshole, a demon, piece of shit. All the above for all I care. None of that stopped me from having something I haven't had in a while. A good night's sleep. Now some people were saying that the fish was good as dead anyway. And yes, I bought the fish not knowing what it needed. So I went to my friends over at r/Bettafish and they gave me the idea of a makeshift tank. And yes, everything was perfectly safe for Eclipse. The plastic storage bin was cleaned and rinsed and filled with room temp water along with the water conditioner. It had the coffee mug to hide in. It had the sponge and air pump as the filter. It had a small heater next to it. Not too close, didn't want to melt a hole in it. It even had some sand in it. Sure, it wasn't the best thing. But I can assure you, if she didn't touch that tank, it'll still be alive today. You can also argue that I only had it for a day. Why does that matter? If you had a puppy for a day, and your loved one took away everything it needed and left it outside, how would you feel? Some people would say they aren't the same thing, but it is. They're living beings. Creatures that could have lasted years. Things that people love. Things that people care for. If that makes me a psychopath, then lock me the fuck up because I'm sick of people disregarding my belongings. Swim in peace eclipse. P.S. I think I need to point out that my aunt doesn't own the house. My uncle does. And he already told me I'm not going anywhere. So I don't need to worry about that. Story 3. AITA for telling my twin sister she will never fit in with us? Asshole. I, 29F, have 4 siblings, Mark, 33M, Josh, 31M, Eva, 29F, and Tony, 26M. Me and Eva are fraternal twins. Our mother was a Psalm, but she was emotionally absent. Growing up, our father was very hard on us. He wanted his first son to be a doctor, so Mark had to work all the time. He had Josh learn violin at 4 years old and made him play for hours. Tony had to be a lawyer. I had the chance to be a beautiful kid, and I participated in beauty pageants starting 3 years old. Eva was free of this because she wasn't beautiful, and my father didn't think a woman could do much anyway. She always had liberty and could do whatever she wanted, without pressure on her shoulders. She could have friends, had no care about her grades, and didn't have to work her ass off every day. We are not proud of it, but we tended to exclude her since she was slacking off while we were working so hard. She also was a problematic teen. She skipped class, hung around with a bad crowd, and drank. She even disappeared for a week without notice when we were 15, stating after that she wanted to get away with her BF for a road trip while I wasn't even allowed to leave the house for a night because my parents wanted to make sure I did my work and would only eat what I was allowed to. Eva would throw tantrums, saying she was neglected and no one would care if she disappeared. I was enraged with her because she never realized the chance she had, and we only grew apart from that point. After high school, I went far away and started working as a makeup artist. I eloped at 26 with Eli, 27M, and never looked back. Last month, our father passed away, and my siblings and I went to the family home for the funeral. We stayed for 3 weeks and reconnected a lot. Mark had a breakdown at 23 from all the pressure and barely recovered. He is now happier, got a job as a tech in a lab, is married, and has 2 little kids. Josh stopped violin and is a drummer and piano teacher, and Tony is a public defender. Eva chose to be a social worker. It was a bit weird with Eva since we hadn't seen each other for years and gave up contact too. She once again tried to dismiss what we went through, saying that she was as abused as us even though that is nowhere near true. One evening she completely flipped out on us, calling us a H and saying that we were like our father and excluded her. She kept going about how our parents never took an interest in her. Neither did we, and that she went through hell thinking she was worthless. Mark started to cry, so I took Eva out and lashed out at her, saying she was the AH for being jealous of our misery and that she will never fit in with us because she never got abused and it was insane of her to claim she had. She left that night and didn't apologize to any of us. When I went home, I cried a lot and told everything to my husband, expecting him to support me, but he said I should be the one to call and apologize to my sister. So AITA?